Hey guys, welcome back to Community Starcraft 2. I'm your host Sidewinder, and I'm going to be bringing you another pro game, or at least I can assume it is a pro game. It's going to be between SCDZingy, who is the blue Zerg down here on Metalopolis, at the bottom side of Metalopolis that is, and he's going to be fighting the teal Zerg, who is bbaboomPrime, who actually has an amazing name. If I had any sort of voice impersonation skills, I would say it the way the GSL announcer says it. bbaboomPrime we! Something to that effect, but nevertheless, this is going to be a Zerg versus Zerg, cross positions on Metalopolis. So we'll see exactly what unfolds. I know you Zerg players out there are all just going to groan at the fact that it is Zerg versus Zerg, which is such a wonky and ridiculous matchup that you never really know what's going to happen. It looks like Baboom is actually going to take his spawning pool on 10. So this is a pretty fast spawning pool here, and it looks like he might be committing to an early Zergling rush. But since he has scouted by this close by air position, you can see they're talking here saying no close positions. So he should be fine to actually just know exactly where his opponent is and rush in there and see what he can get done. On cross positions like that, you really don't need a spawning pool that early. So yeah, I'm not really sure where he's going to want to go with that. Checking the APM tab here. Again, this is a very high-level Zerg versus Zerg. Both of them are really going crazy on that, which again, in this early stage of the game, it's not really going to make a difference, but we'll check into that a little later, since Zerg versus Zerg usually gets insane with the kind of micro you need to do with your Banelings and Zerglings and just random little things you wouldn't normally micro. But yeah, we'll see exactly where that heads throughout the course of the game. Baboom is actually going to be making 6 Zerglings, or he's actually now up to 8. So he is really going to be committing pretty hard to this early push, and of course if it doesn't do any damage, he's going to be pretty far behind his opponent. Zingy's spawning pool is going to be up in time to fend this off, of course, but it just depends on if Zingy actually sees these Zerglings coming, which he actually will with this Overlord. These Zerglings are going to run right underneath it, so Zingy's going to know exactly what's going on. There's going to be a Queen there, a couple of Zerglings, and more Zerglings, I'm sure, as his larvae allow. Just waiting for the extra larva to come out. He's actually so afraid of this push, he's actually going to start a spine crawler, which these Zerglings are obviously going to be there before that spine crawler is done. So we'll see exactly how that comes into play. 2 Zerglings are going to come to the front, and they do not want to fight this because they're going to die easily. The Zerglings are now getting into the mineral line. He did pick off 1 drone there. A little bit of micro battle back and forth, and if you're Baboom, you really need to be aggressive with these Zerglings and not let Zingy get established with his Zerglings. I don't know if he really did enough damage to justify that early pool thus far, but all these Zerglings are in the red. There's a couple of drones in the red, or rather, never mind, all the drones are actually in the full health. So Zingy actually holds that off really nicely. Baboom still wants to be annoying with these Zerglings, though, and see what he can get done. But he's not going to get anything done. He's outmatched in Zerglings enough. There's also a Queen here and a Spine Crawler. Behind this, Baboom actually did not do anything other than just drone, in addition to already having what he has up. You'd usually figure if you go for a push that's that early, that you'd probably want to be very aggressive behind it, since you need that push to do damage if you're going to expect to keep up with them on one base. In response, he actually does throw down a Spine Crawler, and Zingy is actually getting a really, really fast lair. It's coming up at 5 minutes. He's going to be taking his second gas, and interestingly enough, neither player wants to expand right now, which would be fairly safe for both players, considering they're going to now have Overlord vision virtually at each other's front door. This is one big thing in Zerg vs. Zerg, is having vision of your Overlords. As you can see from our teal player Baboom, he actually has huge Overlord vision, basically in a straight line across the map to see anything that might be coming. And the same thing goes for Zingy if he's spreading his Overlords correctly, which his aren't spread quite as nicely as you'd like to see. But nevertheless, it's a weird little mechanic that comes up in this matchup that you're going to see is Overlord spreading, that you would never see in any other match because your Overlords would get killed so easily by the fast anti-air units that are going to be coming out for either race. Roach Warren is now coming down in addition to Burrow and an Infestation Pit for Zingy, so he is teching very, very hard right now, while Baboom is actually putting up a Baneling's Nest. He's expanding, putting out a bunch of Zerglings, so you can see how much different these 2 players' builds are. And Zingy may actually see this Baneling's Nest. It's going to be really close, and I don't think he actually saw that. So that was rather unfortunate. I mean, he was 1 little square away from seeing it, so if he would have seen that, that would have altered this quite a bit, or at least I can imagine. But that Overlord got no scouting information. He did see that there was only 1 geyser up, which I guess can be some scouting information, but I guess it's not all that valuable. These slow queens are actually chasing down these slow overlords. This is a pathetic speed battle. Here comes some Zerglings setting up here at the expansion. He's going to just check to see if it's there, which he's going to say, no, it's not. So I may actually, or he may actually be in business here. This must be an observer in the replay because I don't... Yeah, anyway. Nice observers are distracting us during these amazing pro-level games. But Baboom looks like he wants to really commit heavily to these banelings. You can see 4 banelings are sitting back here. There's a bunch of Zerglings. The drone looks like he wants to expand, but he's not going to be able to. Here comes this insane baneling micro we may see from these 2 players. And if these spine crawlers do kill these banelings, that's going to be pretty big. He does poke 1 to death. There's another one in the red, so he could just donate 1 Zergling to be assigned there. These Zerglings are actually going to get into the mineral line and start bugging these drones. Up comes the banelings. There's an infestor that's actually burrowed here that does almost have enough energy for a fungal growth. He's going to have to wait for just a little bit. Baboom is morphing a couple of banelings over there, so we have to keep our eye on that. Roaches are now popping, and they're going to put an end to this pretty quickly. But if he doesn't account for these banelings that are morphing over here, he could lose a lot of drones. And there's also a bunch of Zerglings here that are going to be able to clean this up too. Behind this, Baboom is making 12 drones, so he's really droning hard, really getting a pretty far ahead in terms of economy. And here come the banelings. They're going to be coming in here, but Zingy actually does notice it. A couple of banelings do detonate and kill a few drones. Pretty minimal damage, considering how much was invested in this attack. But the main theme behind this attack was getting ahead in economy. As you can see, Baboom is now on 2 bases. He's mining pretty hard. He's got a couple of spine crawlers started, but the bad thing for him is that he does not have a roach warren down. And this matchup usually, or at least right now, will come down to roach play versus one another, getting better concaves, using infestors. In terms of income, you can see Baboom is actually 13 workers ahead, almost doubling the income of his opponent. And checking the APM tab after all those battles, again, very high, 123 to 143, which, I mean, it's not usually very interesting to watch APM, but APM in a lot of these pro-level replays, especially in this matchup, can really spike because of how much little intricate micro needs to go on during these fights, which can actually decide the game. So Zingy is now taking his expansion. He does have his overlords on barf mode so that he can get these spine crawlers rooted. There's been virtually no creep spreading at all from Zingy. A little bit from Baboom, but it was partially to get out there and kill those overlords so he could deny as much scouting as possible. You really don't need to spread a lot of creep in this matchup unless it's really vital to what you're pulling off. If you're going for something like Ultralisks, it's definitely very viable or very important to spread your creep. But I haven't seen Ultralisk in a Zerg vs. Zerg for so long. I think the last time I actually saw it was Spanishiwa doing some Ultralisk, Nidus Network, Queen work, which is very rare. But nevertheless, Zingy actually does have 2 almost full energy infestors. So when he decides to push with these roaches, however many he's deciding to make, and however many infestors he decides to make, it's going to be pretty scary for Baboom to try and hold off, considering his infestation pit is just now coming up. He's now getting roach speed, but he does not really have any roaches on the field. He has 4 roaches just sitting here at his front door. No infestors. Obviously no infestation pit is finished yet so that he can get his pathogen glands done. So in terms of tech, Zingy is well ahead. In terms of economy, Baboom maintains a pretty large lead here. So this is pretty varied Zerg versus Zergs. Usually not what you see out of this matchup. You usually see 2 players going for pretty much the same stuff almost the whole game. There's now an Overseer moving out for Zingy, which I actually think Overseers are very underutilized right now, especially in this matchup, because if you can get a push off where you're bringing your forces up here, and if you can contaminate the hatcheries of the Zerg, they're going to have absolutely no reinforcement. And if you know your army's better by the time the fight commences, there's basically nothing they can do to push you off unless they get some sort of really advantageous micro between there. There's actually a Queen reporting out here that's going to be able to kill this Overseer. Overseer comes up here, just going to be for scouting. It should get out of there intact if he is able to skirt out of there quickly enough, which he will. It's going to be kind of close, but he should still get away. Yeah, he does with 29 health remaining. Zingy is now taking his 3rd, in addition to Baboom now taking his 3rd, almost at the exact same time. Looking at the production tab, there's now tunneling claws on the way for these roaches for Baboom, and in addition to Burrow, the other Zerg player, Zingy, already has Burrow, obviously, but his tunneling claws have actually not even been starting. His roach speed is not even done. So it's going to be speed roaches versus non-speed roaches. It looks like Baboom is actually at +1 attack, while Zingy is not. Few scouting Zerglings coming up here. He was trying to make a little wall with these infested terrans, but he doesn't. He's going to get a few drone kills here, but these Zerglings are cleaned up. Small little counterattack there. It's not very expensive to waste these. He actually does burrow these Zerglings, which is a pretty funny tactic. The Roaches are going to come over here and be like, hey, where did these Zerglings go? Still scouting around, looking in the smoke to see where he is. It is really making it work quite hard to try and find these two stupid Zerglings that are just burrowed underneath here. So he's going to have that in the back of his mind for quite a while. Scouting Zergling came up here to see if the third was started, and these Roaches cleaned it up easily. There's actually still an Overlord hanging out over here, which could be used to get some scouting intel a little bit later in the game. But there's so many Infestors out for right now for Zingy that I have to think that when he decides to push, he will actually win the fight quite handily. But he's just not making a lot of Roaches either. You do need to have a good mixture of Roaches and Infestors. Here comes a whole bunch of Roaches for Baboom. Zingy's actually morphing an Overseer right next to these Roaches just so he can see any burrowed or tunneling claw play. Here comes some Infestors which are burrowed, but it's going to be spotted by this Overseer. But the Overseer is actually out of position, so the Infestors are going to scoot right on by, head right down to, I would expect, the natural, but there is an Overseer hanging out here already. They should get killed and donated potentially for nothing. This can be really, really bad if he does lose these Infestors. He does now notice that he's being detected. He unburrows and scoots his fat butt out of there. A whole bunch of Roaches are still kind of wandering around over here, trying to see if he's ready to push in. Baboom actually has a huge supply lead right now, but in terms of army, I'm not so sure who actually has the better army right now. They look about the same, except for Zingy actually has a ton more Infestors, so if Baboom tries to engage here, he might actually lose. Here comes the attack. Infestors are ready to push up. Big fungal growth going off on Zingy's, but look at this fungal growth coverage all over Baboom's Roaches. These Roaches are going to melt to this, and he's going to lose all this just to Infestors. Down they all go. Wow, that was tremendous efficiency right there, and you can see what the power of Infestors are in this matchup. I definitely think eventually Zerg vs. Zerg is going to have to get changed because Infestors are so good in these fights. Literally, like there's really not any reason to not make Infestors in the later stages of the game. More Roaches are pressing up here to see what they can get done. If they can pick off these reinforcing Infestors, that'll be great, but a fungal growth goes all over these Roaches. These Roaches are really going to melt to that fungal growth, considering the fungal growth range outranges these Roaches so badly. Up comes an Overseer. 4 Zingies just kind of collaborating them together. Yeah, Baboom actually has the gold now, so he's going to be up a mining base. A couple of Overlords that are stray are getting in here and seeing what's going on. But in terms of economy, Baboom is still ahead by 10 workers, but at this stage of the game, the gold is going to be kicking in and his economy is really going to erupt. He really needs to stay on top of his injects, obviously, so he can keep those Roaches flooding out. In terms of unit counts, there's 13 additional Roaches for Baboom, but he is down by 5 Infestors. A little bit more macro going on here. The 4th is now being taken for Zingy, which is a non-gold 4th. So he's being a little bit more conservative, a little more defensive as he's been the whole game. Mixing in Hydralisks into this army for Baboom is actually a really smart choice, considering they don't take as much fungal growth damage, and considering that if they're being protected by Roaches, they do a lot of damage. So we'll see exactly how this breaks down as the game commences. There's now +1 Carapace on the way. The Hydralisk range is about done. +2 should be done for both players here in just a moment. So even upgrades on the Roaches.